This is a lecture from OpenTuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
In this lecture, I'm going to go through chapter 3, which is presenting information. And again, it's a very short one. Again, there are no calculations involved. And I do hope you've printed out the notes, and if you print it in colour, you'll see it's all very pretty. But what it is, I said in the first lecture on chapter 1, that one of the jobs of the management accountant is to produce information for management to help them run the business. And this is looking at how we give them that information, the various ways we can present it to them. One is just to give them a table. Look at that table in paragraph 2. They might want to know what the sales have been over a period of years. So there you've got from 2006 up to 2010, what the sales are in thousands. And so a nice simple table. The only thing about tables, though, is if they can end up getting overcomplicated, and management themselves aren't always terribly good with numbers. We mentioned earlier, good information is given to them in a way that's easy to understand. Now that table, I think they should be able to understand it. Sales seem to have been growing quite nicely. But I think you take my point. There's no point in giving them great long tables and expecting them to start doing arithmetic on it. And so, very common as a way of making it easier to understand is to present it in the form of a chart or a graph. Now, I'm not going to attempt to draw these because I think they're fairly clear enough. The first one you've got there is a simple bar chart. Maybe they want to know what the sales were for each quarter of the year, first 3 months, second 3 months, and so on. And so to have bars, well, I couldn't draw it, but still. The first quarter, the sales were 1.2, so the bar is 1.2 units long. In the second quarter, the sales were 1.4. Third quarter, they were 3.2, so much bigger bar. And the fourth quarter, they were enormous. 8 point something, 8.2. And so it just looks a bit nice to say. It makes it immediately obvious not only are sales growing, but they've, so in the fourth quarter, they've grown enormously. So that's a basic bar chart, but there are two ways that can be not improved, but can be changed a bit. You'll see the next one is something called a compound bar chart, in that maybe we've two departments, and we want to show how the sales per quarter are moving in each department. Well, you could have two separate bar charts. This could be Department 1 and another one for Department 2. But a nice way of making it much easier to compare is to have two bars side by side. So the first quarter, that can be one department, and perhaps the other department was a bit smaller. All right. If you bring out the notes, they're in colour. Otherwise, you could shade them or something. The second quarter, again, the shaded one is one department. The unshaded one is the other department. But it just means we can compare. You can see how they're growing. And look at the fourth quarter, whereas the first department had always been behind, lower sales than the second department. The fourth quarter, the first department shoots ahead. Again, it makes it that much more obvious. And again, if it was just a table of figures, it wouldn't be nearly as immediately obvious as it is with that chart. The other way is this component bar chart. It says there's series 1, series 2, but imagine we sell 3 different products. What you might do again is have sales per quarter, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's your basic bar chart. So these are sales. These are per quarter. But although I've shown their total sales, maybe we have 3 different products, and it will be interesting to know not just how the total sales are moving, but how the total sales for each of the 3 products were. And so we could split it and say, one product had that many sales, the next product had that many sales, and the third product had that many. And maybe in quarter 2, that first product had that many. Second product didn't change much. The third product, a lot bigger than quarter 1, and so on. I don't know why I'm doing this, but still. I think you can see what I'm getting at, even though it's not very pretty. The only slight downside there is, although it's very obvious how total sales are moving, and it's very obvious how that first product's sales are moving, it's not quite as easy to compare, for instance, the second product, because they're not in line with each other. But they're just different ways available of presenting data. Which way we'd use depends on the data and who's going to be looking at it. And incidentally, you'd never be asked to draw one of these, ever, in the exam. But you can be, the exam can and will check that you do know what each of these are. The last actual chart is a pie chart, where it looks like a pie with various slices in it. And you can see the one there, it's sales, again, per quarter. But the size of the pie, the slice rather, that's 1.2. 1.4 is a bit bigger, 3.2 is bigger, and then the 8.2 is very big. So the size of the slice varies according to how many are in that category. Now, one thing they can test you on this, without again having you draw one, is suppose I was doing sales per country, and I suppose I told you that the UK had 50% of our sales, maybe 20%, 30% to the US, and the other 20% I'll say are other. Well, how would we draw the pie? UK is 50%, so they would be half of it. US is 30%, so that would be 25. 30%, oh sorry, that's US. And other, the remaining 20%. Now, what I'm getting at is, although they can't ask you to draw it, what they could ask you for is the angle of the slice. Now, you should know from school that the total angle is 360 degrees, all the way around. And so how many degrees will the UK be? Well, they're half of it, which is going to be 180 degrees. Half of 360. What's the angle for the US? Well, they're 30% of the total, so it'll be 30% of 360 degrees, which, I should have chosen nicer figures, but 30% of 360. So the angle would be 108 degrees, degrees. And finally, what about other? Well, they're 20% of the total, so the angle would be 20% of 360, which is what, 72 degrees. And in total, what do they add up to? 288, they add up to 360. But that's one, all right, a tiny bit of calculation, one that they could ask you. They'll give you something like this and say, what will be the angle for the slice representing the US? And give you a choice of 4 answers. The correct one is 108 degrees. Lastly, scatter graph, which I'm not going to draw there. I think it's giving the sales in each of 5 years there. And sorry, then there's no argument, I will. Here are the sales. 2006, 2007, 8, 9, 10. And a very simple graph, but not a precise graph and not drawing the line or anything. 2, 4, 6. The sales in 2006 were what? A bit under 3,000. In 2007, they were a bit higher. 2008, higher still. Levels off a bit. So, to give it as a simple graph, we don't, this sort of thing, we don't normally sort of draw the lines. But again, presenting it like that for management can make it more obvious to what extent things are growing. You know, it's gone up a lot, it's not gone up as much, and so on. Okay, that was chapter 3. The next chapter, although there's some chat, we can start slowly getting into the numbers.